it causes, stress and anxiety, and that ends up causing a low mood. And when I look at my genetics, I see that I have a high genetic predisposition for having a low mood, stress, and anxiety.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. And one thing I will mention, if you have not yet, I've never asked this before, but if you could please subscribe, rate, review, that would mean a lot to me as well. We don't do external advertisements or anything like that. And we do want more people to know about this. So please, it would mean a lot if you would share and subscribe, rate, review. Today, I am very excited because we have with us Joe Cohen, who basically says that he won the genetic lottery of bad genes. He suffered as a kid from inflammation, brain fog, fatigue, lots of different anxiety, depression problems. And he was really frustrated by the lack of good information and tools. So he decided he was going to start doing self-experimentation, self-learning. And so he's gone through over 30,000 different PubMed articles. He's been known as a biohacker himself. He's done thousands of experiments. He's published articles as well. He's the CEO of Self-Hacked, SelfDecode, and Lab Test Analyzer. He's going to talk as well a lot about DNA testing and what you can gain from the results of your own DNA tests as well. But I'll let him tell you a little bit more about that right now. So Joe, thank you for joining us here today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So why don't you start just by giving people a brief introduction, a little bit about you. I know I gave a brief one, but how we got to where we are today and how you started, how you came to start SelfDecode.
Yeah, so it all started when I was growing up with health problems since as far back as I can tell. That's why I always say that I won the lottery of bad genes, because I don't think I was, I always saw myself as not handling life stressors in the best way. And I had a lot of issues from a young age when most kids seemed to be healthy. But so that's kind of what got me into health. I realized that my body wasn't working the way that it should. People were living way less healthy than me, eating crap. And they didn't seem to have any significant issues when they were young, at least. Right. And so that's kind of, and I tried the usual routes and it wasn't helping me. And so I realized that there had to have been an approach that, would work. And so I went about it systematically, where I tried different approaches, and each approach that I tried didn't work. I tried self-help. I tried, taking people's formulas. I tried different diets, and I found that it just wasn't working for me. Just whatever that kind of strategy, that general strategy of just following what worked for other people, it wasn't working for me. And so I came to a couple realizations. Number one is I needed to really understand how the body worked, really understand how everything in my environment was interacting with me, and then also get information that was precise from my body. So not just read general information, but also get information. How does my body tick? And so that was the genesis of the doing SelfDecode, which was, I'm really passionate about analyzing genetics, lab tests, and other kinds of personal data in order to get personal recommendations. And so, and for myself as well, I'm also curious how my body works. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
Cool. Yeah. And it's something that I've been talking about quite a bit recently, as I've realized this, is that, I used to be sort of very, very narrow-minded when I learned about health, and I did, I changed my diet and I reduced inflammation in my body, and this worked for me. And it was just like, why doesn't everyone do this? This is the right way. This is the way. you should listen to me because this worked for me. But as I've evolved, I've realized that different things work for different people, and some things don't work for some people and some things do, and everybody's different. And obviously our genetics will play a role in that. So with DNA, let's actually jump right into DNA testing. And I know is the DNA testing that you guys do at SelfDecode, that's basically just like a saliva or a swab. It's not even blood testing. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. So that's what I've heard. Most DNA testing is just saliva or a swab or something like that. So it's not really even invasive. You don't have to draw, 28 vials of blood like I did one time when I wanted to get every biomarker checked. So then tell me about that. So somehow, which is pretty miraculous, that technology that someone can just spit in a tube and send it to you, and then you can decode their entire genetics. I mean, maybe you could actually talk about that real quick. How is that even possible?
I mean, technology, it's so yeah, I mean, you could spit in a tube and within each cell you have your whole DNA. And so there's huge amounts of data within each cell of the body. And and the tech has gotten good enough to, analyze and figure out a whole bunch of variants, genotype, sequence a whole bunch of variants from from just your spit. So yeah, the thing is that it's been getting cheaper, and so now you can, we're analyzing 83 million variants when we come up with different risks, and we're using deep learning to come up with to predict various predispositions and also the recommendation as well.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I did do this as well myself many years ago. And it was interesting to hear certain things. Oh, I was lacking in, or whatever it was. I don't have the optimal gene for this, and therefore I could maybe eat more of this or supplement more of this. And so I personally think it's important. I also think blood testing is important. But in combination with the DNA test and the blood test, I think you get a really, really good picture of what's really going on, rather than people just, hearing someone mention some certain way of eating or supplement to take, or, blindly trying to guess what's going to help them. Getting both blood test plus DNA, test really gives you a much better picture of where you're at, I would assume. Right.
So I would agree with that. So you have the DNA, which I think is the basis. It's your blueprint. It's the basis of who you are, right? And obviously your genetic expression changes, and so that's where you're measuring your lab tests and seeing how they change over time. But yeah, so there's definitely a combination where you want to look at your labs, but you also have to know what your blueprint is to understand. The way I see it is understanding your DNA is step one, and then tracking is step two. When you see something is wrong, you can track the labs. So even with the DNA, you could see what you're predisposed to having, like which labs are you're predisposed to having higher levels of, lower levels. So yeah, I think the DNA is the fundamental piece, and then the labs are very good to track over time.
What are some of the big things that would be important for people to know? I know there's, millions of them, like you just said, but, for example, I know and I'm probably saying this wrong, but the ApoE4 gene or whatever it is that makes you potentially more predisposed for Alzheimer. And then in that case, you may want to, make sure you're consuming different foods or potentially different supplements to ensure, since you might have a slightly higher risk of that. What are some of those ones, if you could maybe expand on that, because I'm sure I butchered that one, but between that one as well as other kind of big ones that you see that people didn't know or have really uncovered things for people, or is important for people to potentially be aware of?
Yeah. So the first thing that people should be aware of is, you know, there's many genes that play a role in any kind of anything that goes on in your body, right? But people do tend to understand, like, the body's working with a specific gene that, it's easier to understand that. Now,
Mm-hmm.
there are some genes like ApoE that have a much bigger impact, and that's why they're often spoken about more, right? So BRCA, ApoE. Um, the
Which one's
thing that
that? BRCA? What's the other one you mentioned?
BRCA, BRCA, yeah, BRCA and ApoE are probably the two most well known.
What's
APO,
BRCA? I haven't heard of that one.
it's one related to breast cancer.
Oh,
Yeah. Um, and so BRCA is basically like a protein that protects your body from toxins that might cause cancer, and people with certain variants, um, they are much more likely to get cancer, maybe like 15 times more likely. And
wow.
it's a similar situation with ApoE. If you have a certain variant that doesn't fix the brain as well, from certain injuries or whatever it is, you're more likely to get Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
So that's these are two famous genes, and I don't have the ApoE gene variant, and so it's not really relevant to me. But that's the critical thing, is that most of the gene variants are not going to be relevant to most people. It's the ones that are, that's the ones that you have to care about. So speaking about specific variants are not necessarily going to, it's interesting, and I'll talk about specific ones just so people understand, the idea of it. But essentially, you have to work with intelligent software, and you want to work with intelligent software that's using machine learning, that's looking at a very large number of variants, because what other companies do essentially is, it's something that we did in the very beginning. It's they look looking at few variants, because they are banking on the fact that consumers are not going to tell the difference, and it's like 100 times cheaper to do it that way. To build it, to analyze it, the whole pipeline is 100 times simpler. And I know, because I did both ways, the simple way and the complex way. So it's very easy to identify, if you're in the industry, what companies are doing. But we decided to do the complex way because we felt like, I'm passionate about this industry, and I felt like I want to have the best science out there, right? So that's one thing to realize, is that you want to look for software that's doing the heavy lifting, because you're not going to look at 83 million variants and see what's going on, right? But with that said, there are specific variants and genes that can impact someone in a certain way that will cause them to need a certain kind of regimen, or lifestyle approach, or diet, or recommendation. And I'll give you an example of, for me. And so I've been doing a lot of experiments over the years on my body to test theories, and I kind of get these hypotheses from my genetics. So I will look at, individual gene variants, and see, like, okay, does this make sense based on the whole picture that I know? So one of the things that's been interesting that I've been able to figure out over a long time is that, and this actually took me quite some time, is that I'm deficient on a certain enzyme that creates serotonin. So it basically, there's different enzymes that create 5-HTP and then serotonin. I'm deficient. I'm not getting enough 5-HTP and serotonin. And so that's something. So you say, how did I figure that out? First of all, it showed up in my genetic report as it relates to mood. And so for a long time, I had a very unstable mood. And I started, I looked at my genetic reports when we built the software tool. Even though I was looking at a lot of my genes before that, having the software actually had new insights for me, even, as a user, right, of the software. So that's what I'm saying is looking at the software is very important. But I looked at that and I said, okay, the software says I should take 5-HTP. I'm going to try it out and see what happens. Because I tried it out a couple years earlier and it didn't work for me so well. And the reason it didn't work for me is it made me tired. But the reason that it did that was because I had a lot of inflammation. So when you have inflammation, the body can take serotonin and make other metabolites that can not be so good, right? But when I had already reduced my inflammation, I retried it because of the recommendation, and it turned out that it was, worked for me, right? Now, sometimes I wasn't. One of the biggest mistakes I made was that sometimes I wasn't always consistent with things that worked for me. So sometimes I would just forget for a few months or not take it. And I'm always doing experiments also, and I'm trying a bunch of different things. But so I went through a period where, my mood was really suffering for different reasons, mainly lifestyle. But in hindsight, I was also not. I was forgetting to take the 5-HTP, and eventually I just committed that I'm going to be fixing my mood, and I'm going to be diligent with keeping to the things that I know. And so I kind of said, okay, what are all the things that I've known worked for me in the past? And I retried them all again, one at a time. And, I already knew what was working for me at that point. But I had to kind of recommit to it. And so I tried each thing, and then I was like, yeah, 5-HTP is one of the things. And I eventually figured out that was the one of the key ingredients, because I have this gene that doesn't convert. It's the tryptophan hydroxylase gene. It doesn't convert tryptophan to 5-HTP very well, and so I'm deficient in 5-HTP, which means I'm also deficient in serotonin. The result of that is my mood is unstable. So, unstable in the sense that if I have pressure, it causes, stress and anxiety, and that ends up causing a low mood. And when I look at my genetics, I see that I have a high genetic predisposition for having a low mood, stress, and anxiety. And so that's kind of like, a lot of that has to do with the serotonin pathways. And for me, it's the most significant. And it was able to identify that. And so that's like an example of something that I think is life-changing for me, because as an entrepreneur, I, have many businesses and I deal with a lot of stress. So stress with the predispositions creates a bad outcome. Now, with the 5-HTP, I find that the stress is completely manageable and doesn't feel like stress. It's, it feels like stress, but it's more like eustress, which is, not a bad stress, right? It's taken in stride. And so I think for me, mood was one of the biggest things, improving brain function, improving energy levels, reducing inflammation. These were the things that tremendously made it possible, tremendously helped me, and also made it possible to be an entrepreneur and really, be able to handle a bunch of different situations.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good example. I do remember many years ago also when I did it, and again, probably the place that I did it with was only giving me individual one-off, looking for the big ones, not using software. But they did say something like, my genes are not ideal for detoxing. And so, I think sulforaphane was something that was recommended, and doing more saunas. So I actually bought an infrared sauna, and now I do saunas more regularly to try to detox more, because apparently I don't have the optimal gene, for detox. trying to think what else. Hair. I'm trying to keep my hair. And, you know, I didn't have some sort of optimal gene with regards to, you know, I guess how the prostate or DHT or something. I don't remember exactly, but I just remember, you know, saw palmetto, pumpkin seed oil, and fenugreek were good ingredients to support me in that. So I've been taking those, and you know, I've actually, you know, felt like I've done a pretty decent job of keeping what I have for the last several years as well, which, you know, knock on wood. I think those are all really, really good examples. Are there any others like that? Well, I guess, yeah, we could talk, I guess, about some other examples. I guess people might want to know kind of like how this might relate to them, or just kind of like what are some of the biggest insights people get. Could be more examples of genes. That's always interesting. That was news to me about the BRCA gene. That would certainly be very valuable for someone to know. I guess I'd be curious also then, like, let's say someone did have the BRCA gene, or you know, however you would refer to that, which makes them have a higher likelihood of potentially getting breast cancer or cancer later on. So then if they found out that they had that, is there certain recommendations then, supplements or foods or things that then they could, obviously lifestyle changes, and you know, we all know sleep better, don't eat sugar, the normal stuff, but there's obviously probably more you can do as well if you have this information, right?
Yeah, there's always things that you can do with information, and especially genetic information. So there's ways to protect against cancer and toxins from cancer, and so there's definitely ways to protect when you have the knowledge, and same with ApoE. If you know, if that protein is not as good at fixing damage, you could take fish oil. You could, you know, there's a lot of recommendations that you could do. Curcumin is a good one in order to counteract the negative impacts.
Yeah, I've heard that as well also. Oh, there's actually a couple of great books out there, The End of Alzheimer's, and then I think there's the guy made a follow-up to the End of Alzheimer's playbook. But again, that's something where, especially if you know you have that gene, you could look at supplements, you could start reading books like that, making lifestyle adjustments, and really paying attention to that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'll give you another example with genetics. For me, it's very clear that BDNF is not working very well. BDNF is you know, it's called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and it's basically like, you know, this quick sprout for your brain, and it allows, you know, it's important for quite a lot of processes in the brain and body as well. And so that was another aspect of how I was different than other people, and I think there's about 20-25% of the population that have this as well. But essentially, if you're lower in BDNF, you're more likely to get seasonal affective disorder, because one of the big ways that BDNF is increased is through exercise, but mainly through light. So if you're not getting enough light, your brain might not be working as well. Your mood is not going to be as good. So I noticed that light was extremely important for me, and I didn't know exactly why, right? Because light can do many things. But when I saw that I had these BDNF gene variants, I understood that, you know, light was extremely important. And light also increases serotonin, which is also impactful. But if I get a lot of light in the day, I still could feel like I don't have enough serotonin, whereas I will. So there's a distinct effect that I feel when I don't have enough BDNF, and when I don't have enough serotonin, and when I don't have enough dopamine. It's very clear that the light for me is impacting the most the BDNF, and that's extremely crucial for a bunch of for cognition, you know, improving brain function, mood, a whole bunch of processes. So that's another example of a gene variant that I had, that knowing that I'm able, like, I know that everything that increases BDNF is going to have a positive impact for me on my mood and brain function. And so that's a very important piece of information to have.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned inflammation. Is there like is there a gene related to inflammation? I don't think I've heard of that before. Or is that just more diet and inflammation that you currently have in your body?
There's many genes related to inflammation, right?
Hmm.
So, I have some genes that are related to how my immune system functions. And it's basically, it's called the Th1 and Th17 profile, where it's my immune system is overactive in certain ways. And that could cause autoimmune type of inflammation. And it also makes people more sensitive to foods.
Mhm.
So as people get older, typically they'll develop more food sensitivities, and they're not necessarily allergies. They're more just the body is responding in an over aggressive way to foods, and over time that could also lead to autoimmune disease. So for me, I had these kinds of reactions early on, and I had to go on I tried one food at a time and finally figured out that grains and beans and eggs and dairy were what were causing me the issues, my inflammation issues. And that was really the core of my problem. And when I fixed the inflammation issues, I was more like a normal person in the sense that like I didn't have a condition, right? Um, but I still was then just part of, the norm where everybody's got some kind of problem, mental health, pain, something, there's things here, or there, but it wasn't like, okay, I've got some serious condition here that if I don't take care of this, like I can't function in life at all, right? After that, I was able to function, but since then, it's been just a journey of optimization, and I've had some massive impacts after that. But it was more like along the lines of a normal human, like, not someone who you would categorize as sick, but I was definitely not optimally healthy.
Right. And I think it could be the difference between people who, you know, have total breakdowns or really get it really bad versus, okay, it's bad, but I can cope with it. I can deal with it, right? Because you're aware of it and because you're taking actions because you're aware. So that's very interesting. What else did I want to ask you about with related to this? What about in terms of privacy? I know there's concerns about with related to DNA, like with privacy and things of that nature, or people being very cautious from that perspective. Have you encountered that, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, a lot of other companies have you know, they they have a business model where they sell data as part of the way they monetize. And so that is something that's more common in some bigger companies. We have very strict policies against selling people's data. So we just monetize through the app, and we have to make sure that we're profitable on its own, and because we're not allowed to sell data as part of our policy.
Yeah. So yeah, why don't you tell people then a little bit about self-decode, kind of how it works, what the process looks like, where they can sign up, things like that.
Yeah. So imagine, like we were mentioning, you have all of your DNA, and all that information is waiting there for you to make better decisions in your life, right? And what we do is go through your DNA, and we create a bunch of different reports that you can read up, which, based on your interest, what are you interested in? If you don't want to read up on anything because you just want to see what are your recommendations, we give you a list of recommendations as well in order to follow, right? Same with supplement recommend. We have lifestyle, we got supplement recommendations. And so an individual can just look at the supplement recommendations if they don't want to do any reading, but we also explain why those recommendations come up. They can go and buy a supplement if they wanted that's packaged into one container. So they can create whatever supplement they want through, building out their own regimen. And we have basically like recommendations, diet, lifestyle, supplements. And so people can build out a regimen from the reports. And we also give suggested, based on suggested recommendations based on what shows up in various reports, and we allow people to work back. So people can either go from it in two ways. They can either see the recommendations and then look at why those recommendations are made, or they can look through their reports if they have specific issues that they are trying to solve, and then build their own regimen. They could also upload labs, fill out questionnaires, and build a regimen that way as well.
Okay. Oh, cool. So basically, they could upload their blood test results as well to be combined with your DNA test results, and then get an even bigger picture.
Correct. And also fill out a lifestyle assessment, see if there's any like blaring lifestyle choices that they're making that are increasing their risk for that issue.
Nice. Do you guys do offer the blood testing as well, or you just have people do that separately and then upload it?
We offer the blood testing, just like we also offer the genetic kit. So you can buy a genetic kit, you can buy blood tests, and you can also upload an existing kit that you got somewhere else, like 23andMe or Ancestry, or you can upload existing lab tests.
Okay, interesting. Now the blood tests that you're doing, the ones that you're doing, like full on, like pulling blood, right? Not, or is it just finger prick blood tests?
Both. So
Both.
you can choose which ones you want. It's it's somewhat of it's in one platform, but it's a bit of a separate service.
Mm-hmm.
But basically you have the DNA. You can look at all your DNA reports, your traits. You can look at any one of the 83 million variants that we have as well. You can look at your genotype if you're interested. So, as a good example, COVID came along and there was certain variants that were associated with worse outcomes for COVID. And you could just, if you see any kind of SNP or any kind of study that's done, you could also, you could just look that up and see what your genotype is.
Interesting. So you could read other studies and they would mention something about a certain gene. You could then go check and see, do I have this gene or not? Very interesting.
But we make everything simple enough so that, everything is very simple so that people don't have to do this kind of reading. And, we have very complex algorithms that are doing the hard work for people.
Nice. And that's at selfdecode.com?
Correct. Selfdecode.com.
And is it different packages, or do you just kind of have one? I guess there'd be one genetic testing package and then more if you want to do blood testings and things of that nature. What for the genetic one, the DNA, is there kind of a normal price? I'm sure people would be curious.
Yeah, so we charge $99 for the kit, and we charge the packages. The basic package is $150 for the kit and a group of reports.
Nice. Very
and
reasonable.
then it's $97 for subscription, which is a yearly subscription where they get access to all the services. Or they could just do a one-time fee if they want for $297.
Okay, got
plus
it.
and whether they need a kit or not, it's either plus the $99 or not. But in general, I always recommend people get a kit. The reason is because, let's say you have 23andMe and you download your file, they actually exclude a lot of information, even though our kits are somewhat similar. Ours is a little better, but forget about that. Whether it's 5-10% better, that's not why you should do it. It's because when you download a file, they are excluding a lot of information from that file. It's kind of just like,
they're not going to give you 83 million. They're not going to give you 83 million rows.
well, they're not testing for 83 million rows, but they're even what they do test for, they just exclude a lot of information because, for different reasons. But essentially, it becomes like a telephone game where, they download, you download it, it's missing information. Then when you upload it to us, we're lacking that information, and your results are not going to be as accurate as if you were to just buy a test from us.
Got it. One thing I wanted to ask you about the with in terms of blood testing, is finger prick blood testing, accurate or as accurate as, really getting your blood drawn and having enough of a sample size? I've heard that concern. There's a lot of kind of test kits where you can just finger prick and mail it in, but some people have said that they felt those are not as accurate or paint a good enough picture compared to like really getting, vials of blood drawn.
I think it depends on the test, but the ones that we offer are more or less as accurate, right? Maybe there's a 5 or 10% difference, but it is accurate. Or else, yeah, I mean, it is accurate, right? These labs have to be accurate enough that they're close enough to the original lab. But yeah, they're accurate. The ones that we provide are accurate.
You'd probably just be with a small finger prick sample size of blood. You may not just be able to test for as many things as if you had many vials of blood where you could test for maybe many, many more markers. Would that be right?
That's also true. That's also true. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, that's why I think some of these ones that you see that sell, one-off things like test, only one thing for a finger prick or test, whereas when you get your blood drawn, you're maybe testing, 40 markers or 50 or more. Cool. Great, man. Well, is there any other information or kind of points here that you think people should be aware of with regards to, genetic DNA testing?
Yeah, I think it's a really complex field. And there's a lot of insider things that I've learned just running a company for 6 years. And I think it's very confusing to the consumer. The things to really look out for are, where's your data getting sent? Some companies send it to China. Is your data getting sold? Some companies sell the data. And by the way, the China thing is not uncommon. It happens quite a lot because, like other things, it's cheaper to do the sequencing or genotyping in China or in Hong Kong, in which case right now Hong Kong is part of China. So that's something to be aware of. Also, the number of the number of variants that are analyzed and genotyped, right? So many companies are only they're only genotyping 100,000, and the reason is it's cheaper to do that, right? And then how many are they analyzing? So some of them will actually analyze. The gold standard is about 750,000 in terms of genotyping. That's the most common. But we use very sophisticated AI machine learning to predict 83 million variants with 99.7% accuracy. We're the only company that is able to do that, right? And so it's not only like how many variants are being analyzed per topic or overall. Every company that I've seen is looking at less than 1,000 variants, analyzing in total 1,000 variants. And with the exception of 23andMe, but they're not analyzing many things. They have very specific focuses. So it's very important to realize that these health companies are really taking a very narrow look at your health. And if you want to use the most cutting edge methods, you want to use software that's looking at all of your variants and using cutting edge AI and machine learning to do that.
Great. Well, great. So again, just want to tell people if they want to learn more from you, or I guess selfdecode.com is the website where they can get their kit and find out more information. Anything else you want to mention in terms of where people can find you or learn more?
Yeah, they can go to Mr. Biohacker on Instagram. I have as a hobby, I have my personal mood formula that I've created, which again is not going to work for everybody if they don't have a similar profile as me, but that's getjoe.co. We also have a resistant starch there. That's very good for brain function, blood sugar stabilization. Doesn't have any of the toxins that potato starch has. So it's good for mood, weight loss, and also brain function, gut health. That's something, and the reason I sell that one is because that was one of the best things that I've ever taken, and I didn't find any good ones on the market. So, yeah, I mean, resistant starch is one of my favorite. 5-HTP, lithium orotate, pregnenolone. I've got a lot of favorites. I guess like maybe 5, 10. But in any case, but yeah, SelfDecode is my main project, and that's really where cutting edge technology that we're doing. And yeah, I think everybody should get their DNA tested, and you know, it's just gonna get better and better. And I think that if anyone wants to be an entrepreneur or perform as well as possible, you really got to know your body and get personalized recommendations.
Sounds great. Well, Joe, thank you so much for joining us. This was really insightful. We have not done one on DNA and genetic testing before, so I'm sure a lot of people learned some great new information. I learned some new information here as well today. So, want to really thank you for coming on the show, and hope to speak with you again soon.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, thank you. Thanks for listening. And just a reminder, if you haven't yet tried any of our Peak Performance products, you get 20% off your first order. We have one of the largest selection of USDA certified organic superfood powders, as well as very high quality supplements. And you get 20% off your first order at buypeakperformance.com. That's www.buypeakperformance.com.